you to be tuning in today. We are launching into the discussion of school. And I know it is summer break, but this is the time when that a lot of people are making decisions about the next school year. So what a better time to launch into the topic, talking about school in general. I feel like this has been a hot topic since 2020 when we thought that everything that we knew kind of went topsy-turvy. We thought everything was in a routine. And then the school system kind of continued to unravel. So at that time, a lot of people started to reevaluate everything from pre-K up until college and university level, reevaluate what school looks like for us here in the United States. And so I want to dive into this topic of schooling because it's such a huge topic. It's such a foundational part of our society for building our children and what that looks like as Christians. So I've invited a special guest, Pastor Julia Thomas from Rochester, New York, to join me today to give her insight and her expertise on what they're doing in Rochester, and also to bring balance to what we're doing here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, what I'm doing. We have our special guest, Coco, on the couch next to me, our dog. But you know, so Pastor Julie, you're going to launch into the discussion of a co-op, homeschooling. We're going to talk about private schools. So we're so excited to have you today on the Joie Miller Podcast. So welcome.
Oh, thank you, Pastor Joy. I mean, what an honor. I mean, I'm such a huge fan of you and Pastor Nathan and all of the things that you guys are doing at Champion Christian Center. We're always there with you guys in spirit and cheering you on. So we love everything you're doing there. And so, homeschooling is something that me and my husband are extremely passionate about, that we're excited about. We have started our church called The Gospel. We started it about 8 years ago. And as we were growing, we really found that a lot of families that were coming to our church, they had this interest for homeschooling. And so we had just very young children. We hadn't made our decision yet. And when we first kind of made the decision, I was very nervous about it. I think I was very much more like, how could I teach my kids? How could I, be educating them? And I think right there was that first initial nudge in my heart, where it's like, you went to public and private school. Like, why did you feel like you were not equipped to be able to teach your children and to educate them? What is kind of maybe lacking in that system that you felt like you weren't capable of doing that? So, but starting out, when I was growing up, my mom tried to homeschool me at first when in kindergarten, and she didn't accomplish the first year. But then I went back and forth between public and private and then public again. And so for me, I've been kind of having all of these aspects of the education system growing up. And for me, it was very similar between the influences between the education. I can't, for me personally, say that one was much more superior than the other. They were both very similar. And then on the other side, my husband was homeschooled when he was younger in elementary school. And my mother-in-law had 3 boys all within 3 years. And so it came a point where it was too much for her. So she did send her boys then to public school. And when they joined public school, they were far surpassing in all of their academics. My husband was already doing division and multiplication and all of these things when they were just learning addition and subtraction. So for us, when we then came time to decide for our family what was best for us, my husband was always very strong on we will homeschool. And it took a little while for me to come around to terms, but now I wouldn't have it any other way. So
I love this. And I love that you're joining me because I didn't homeschool. I was not homeschooled. In fact, our oldest is 21. So I feel like right now homeschooling is like something hot to do, like hot commodity. Homeschooling, it's very accepted by society. So back when my kids were smaller, it was a little more foreign to homeschool your kids. And it had that stigma, let's just be honest,
yes,
that homeschooling was weird and you were just kind of going to be Amish and so it was this stigma that you were going to lack something as far as a social aspect, or your kids were going to be missing something if you did homeschool. And I love what you said, because you said that you and your husband, as you began to pray and to think about and have discussions about what the education system was going to be like within your home. And I feel like it all starts there. If you're watching or listening to this podcast, maybe you're in a position where you have small kids, or you just don't know what to do, what's right to do for your children. And I would say, start in that aspect of having discussions with your spouse and praying about what that looks like for your family. Just because we've always done something a certain way doesn't mean that that's the best way to do it. And so to really go before the Lord and ask him what is best for your children, your situation, and your family. The government and school system in different parts of even the United States, even in different parts of Pennsylvania where we are, look completely different. And so to hear people make blanket statements about the school system, even if they are true, it might not be exactly true where you're living. For instance, we could definitely say there's a liberal agenda. We could definitely say the school system is declining in morality and things like that. We could project forward and predict what it's going to be like probably in the next few years. But right now, our current situation is, we're in the public schools, and, it's still very moral friendly in the sense of we're in a highly even Catholic community. So a lot of our school system is very open to having discussions, about faith, or if my kids write about the Bible and post it on the wall, or certain teachers that are Christians will know my kids are Christians and have discussions on the side about Bible verses. And so I think the main thing is not taking a cookie cutter approach to it, but to educate yourself and to pray about what is best for your family. And that's what this whole purpose of this podcast is, to bring balance and education to both sides of it, and to hear how the church is actually being a solution and rising up, because I'm projecting that in the next decade at the least, it's going to be less of an option for us, just the way with things are going in general as Christians, that homeschooling is probably going to continue to rise. So for us personally, I want to get into, Pastor Julia, what you're doing there in Rochester and your why. But for us personally, we have 5 kids, and my husband went to a Christian school. I went to public school, and I just thought we were always going to send our kids to a private Christian school. It wasn't even a question in my mind. Homeschooling wasn't really popular at the time, even though I was staying home with the kids. And so we went to register our child. He went to preschool and kindergarten in the private school, and went to register him for first grade, and really felt like we weren't supposed to do it. And I don't know, Pastor Julie, if you've ever had this moment that you're like, God, this can't be you, because it seems so contradictory to everything that I just always thought, or, projected would be just a no-brainer for my kids. And so it really took a step of faith for me to be obedient. My husband was in agreement with it, to send our kids to public school. And so we went into it with the understanding that, we had to be teaching the Bible at home even stronger. And we went into it with a mission field kind of mentality. Yeah. And it's been really cool. And we'll share about that throughout this podcast of how God's actually used it. But one thing I told the Lord was, I said, Lord, I will obey you in this as long as I never see it interfering with my children. If at any point I see it going a different direction, like you and I are going to have this conversation again, Lord. And because he would never set us up, I don't believe, for that. But we want to be obedient, because in the middle of the will of God and walking in obedience is the safest place to be.
That's right.
And as parents, sometimes I think we can try to protect our kids right out of the will of God if we're not careful. So anyway, and after 2020, I tried again, Pastor Julia. I was like, you know what? The school system is just horrible. Right now in the middle of COVID, let's go back and revisit the Christian school, the one that's not going to shut down if COVID happens. And so we went and we toured the school. And in my mind, I am like, Lord, surely this is what you want for my children. And sure enough, no, like as clear as can be, not the path for us. So, so really finding out what God wants for your family and your children is definitely the biggest factor, and not feeling condemned if you are a working mom. Some moms just simply don't have the option to homeschool. A lot of families are dual income, and they just can't do it. So we're going to talk through some of those options. We're going to talk through equipping your kids, no matter where they're at in their schooling, making sure that their faith is strong, the foundation is set properly. But so Pastor Julia, you're coming from New York.
Yes.
First of all, talk to me a little bit, and I know we can, like I said, speak globally, we can speak nationally for the United States, but what is the climate of your school system in a state such as New York? Now you're outside of the city, you're in Rochester.
Right.
But speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so we are like on the outskirts of Rochester, which is still, it's a smaller community feel, but we have still seen like, a lot of that different agendas and things taking place. But for us, ultimately, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. There's some people that it's just like, for homeschooling, it's not the option. It's not the answer for them. And for me and my husband, when we first started out in our marriage, it was like, we had to always follow and be on the same page of what do we have peace about. And so it's really understanding all different aspects of the schooling system and then making the best decision for each family. And so for us, those decisions in New York are very different than other states. But for us, there was a lot of the agenda and different things that were taking place in this state that were really kind of becoming red flags for us, that was like directing us that like, no, we have more peace than ever before, that this is what's best for us. So on a local level, for us, there were things that our governor was taking away religious exemptions for vaccines. And so these were things that were just causing us to ask questions as to like, why is that? What's in the vaccines? What's going on with that? And so just always wanting to have knowledge and understanding of whatever it is that we're doing, are we doing it because it was just what was being told is the best and the right thing to do, or is it what we have peace about? And so when it came to that, it was sort of kind of, we were asking questions. Then when it came to COVID, I think that COVID was like, honestly, a really big equalizer for the homeschooling world, because it sent everyone home and everyone was homeschooling for a while there. And so people realized like, this isn't as difficult as I thought that it would be, but that it's also, the social aspect of it too, that as long as you're making sure that social aspect of it is a priority, it is attainable. And I think then for us, the masks were mandated in school. The COVID vaccine was mandated for kids going to public school. There's also a lot of the agenda as far as like here in New York State, we have like, there's kitty litter boxes that are being added into the public school bathrooms. So for us, there's so much that's just like, okay, what is this influence that's taking place upon our children? And so these sort of things we were asking that stuff. And so for us, there is also, the teachers are not very friendly with like, allowing God and the Bible and different things like that to be in the public schools. And, what's something so great is that then when my husband went to public school growing up, because I shared before that he was homeschooled, just like you were saying, they can be the light in that public school. You have to be very intentional with your children. But that's whether you're homeschooling or you're not. And so when they received Jesus and they were like on fire for God, they were bringing like vanfuls of students from public school to their church. And so, it's like, you can still be the light in anywhere that God has you and where you have peace. But like you're saying, you have to have the will of God and the peace for what it is for your family. And so, yeah, in New York State, there's a lot of different things that might be in Pennsylvania, might be in Florida. And so we do have families that are leaving New York to go to Florida. So, but it's really about, where does God have you planted and that peace for your family.
That's right. And where you're going to make the impact. And, and just as a reminder too, that we're not to run from darkness, that homeschooling isn't about running from darkness. It's about being obedient to where God has called you to be. And truly, God is using what you're doing there in New York to really break ground. And I see what you're doing at the gospel, Pastor Julia, as really a trend that I see most likely is going to be happening within the church world, that the church was never called to just be an establishment that we did for a half an hour to an hour on Sundays. That church was actually to set the precedence in every area of our lives, that culture in and of itself is to be established on a foundation of the church, that whether that's government, entertainment, school systems, that we're to be the head and not the tail. And so in saying that, that's going to manifest in different ways. In some aspects, it's going to be Christian families that feel called to the public school system to get involved, to be on the school boards, to help making decisions. Because if we completely just withdraw, then we're losing the aspect of light and taking ground within the school systems themselves. So, being a part of that, being active, when my kids were small, trying to be in the classroom as much as I possibly could, on the football fields, when they were active in sports, looking at it as a mission field. We've seen coaches and their entire families come and become water baptized at our church champion because of our kids. One gentleman still comes today. Our son Addison was on his football team, and he was swearing at the kids. And Addison said, "Excuse me, coach, I don't think you should be talking like that." And so that one moment where this little second grader called him out was pivotal. And he was like, the conviction came and he knew he had to get back to church. And so just seeing that. But on the other aspect, God's calling people to do what you're doing and preparing, I believe, for what the future holds as far as establishing the church as part of the educational system. So Christian churches have private schools, which is great. And it is a great foundation for education in Christianity. And I love when that happens and a good church and a good school are together advancing the gospel. And then you have those who are homeschooling, and the churches are then creating what is called a co-op. Maybe you're new to the homeschooling world, or maybe you've just always been in public school and you don't know about co-ops. And co-ops are a great way that the church has come in and created a support group for those who want to homeschool, but really didn't feel like it was possible or didn't feel like they had the support. So why don't you speak for a little bit about what a co-op is, Pastor Julia, and how it's kind of evolved at the Gospel in New York?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like you were saying before, is that, for me growing up, homeschooling was like for the weird kids. It was like, or the kids were just as a result weird because of being homeschooled. And so a lot of times it's because when parents were homeschooling, they weren't realizing that they're not only taking on the academic responsibility, but they're also taking on their kids' social aspect and of their lives. And so it's very crucial then that when we're homeschooling, our kids are socially around other kids, that it's great to have them at home with you, but that ultimately they are not going to be social or be building relationships unless they're around other people. And so we've seen with co-ops are a great way that families can connect, that are like-minded, that are homeschooling, and that they can encourage and also kind of lighten the load for families that are homeschooling, that they can cover some of the curriculum that is required to be teaching students. And so for us, when our church was growing, we were adding a lot of these families that homeschooled, and we were like, let's solve a need. Let's provide a need for these families, and let's create a co-op, which is where the families come to our church and the parents are involved in teaching, or we provide by bringing in other teachers or volunteers that will teach. For example, one of our teachers that teaches physical education, she was a teacher for 33 years in the public school system, and now she's retired, and she comes and blesses us by being a teacher for our homeschool co-op. So that's traditional co-ops is like where families, it's required for one of the families to come in and to teach for the co-op. But for us, we put a little bit of a spin on it because we recognize that there's some families, they just have so much going on, or they have little ones, and for them, they can't do that. And it's very difficult for them to be coming up with curriculum and things like that at home. So we have just volunteer basis, or we provide the teachers. I teach, my husband teaches, my mother-in-law teaches. And so we provide that for the families. And it's been such a blessing for some of these families that they couldn't time-wise be able to do this at a traditional co-op, we put a little bit of a spin on it. And so for us, we cover like, their sciences, some of their, the art classes. My mother-in-law, she teaches German. My husband teaches German. And so German language. And so one of the main reasons why we homeschool is that we would have the freedom at a young age to instill and to teach our children what we felt was best for them. And so when you go to a public or a private school, you're taking on that, whatever it is that they feel that's best for the requirement. And so for us, we wanted a little bit of that freedom. And that also, what's different about our co-op is that we are a Christian-based co-op. So all of our teachers are Christian, the majority of the students that are coming here, that they are believers, and that then also our teachers have the freedom if they want to teach some things, if it's like, Noah's Ark, or they're sharing about Jesus, that they have that ability. It's not like a kids' church where we're focusing strictly on the Bible, but that we have the freedom to be able to do that. So a co-op really provides that need socially, but also can help lighten the load curriculum wise for homeschooling. Because for me, when I got on board with the idea of homeschooling, I felt like, how can I accomplish all of this? How can I teach all of them? Like, I barely passed, like chemistry and calculus. How would I be able to do that? But you see, as time goes on, that really your kids, they have this desire and love for learning, and that within a short time frame at home, they can actually accomplish what they need to learn instead of like a full day of the things that's happening at a public or a private school. So for us, that we do our co-op on Fridays, and we come from 10 to 1:30. And we provide 5 to 6 classes for them. But really, you see such those social relationships. We've had some families where they've never joined a co-op, and we're their first co-op, and they're like, it just has changed a world of difference between the social aspects of them interacting with other people. Some families, they feel like if they have their children suffer with like depression or anxiety, when they come to our co-op, if they're having a day or a moment, and I'm just like, let me just pray with you, let me just pray for you. And they know, we have about 70 students, and though I know all of my students' names, I know, their last names, I know about them, I'll pray with them. Like, I have such a love and desire to see all of my students excel. And so that's really what is different with our co-op, is that we have this personal relationship with these kids, and we love them, and we believe the best for them. So
I love this. And I love that it really truly gives like a hybrid option. So can parents, do they stay on Fridays, or do they drop their kids off? How does that work?
Yeah. So some of the parents, they do drop off their kids. We try to accommodate some of it, but we're also not completely a drop off. So it's great when a lot of the parents are here to help assisting with things, and they take pride in that they're seeing those moments with their kids blossoming, and that like we do a show and tell, and they give in front of their entire class. And so like public speaking, so they're like proud of their kids. And so for some, we do drop off, but for the majority, the parents are here, and really for them, they're just seeing their kids blossom and like interact. And so that's what's so great about it.
And what's interesting that is happening there, and we're going to talk about this in a second, is that you're actually seeing it as an outreach or a mission field of families coming into church. So I feel like before 2020, a lot of people thought homeschooling was just for like weird Christians or whatever. And then post 2020, I feel like it gave people permission to redefine or question how they educate their children. And so even a lot of people who maybe wouldn't say that they are Christians in the sense of go to church every Sunday are reevaluating things. But I feel like the pitfall in the past has been anything education wise that Christians have tried to do church-based, like you said, would be heavy on the Bible story, which is great. But then it would be light on academia. So you're going to a faith-based school, but you feel like you have to make a decision between your child receiving a good education or having that faith base. And when it's done right, like you are doing there in New York, which I want you to speak into how it's become an outreach, when you do it with excellence, when you say no, like your children are actually going to receive a very good high level education, almost as if it were a private school in the sense of getting those extra languages at a young age and things like that. Then it's not looked at as a cute little church Sunday school extension
Mhm.
or a VBS that we go to once a week, the church is taking back that area and saying, no, we're redeeming education, that we're raising up intelligent, smart Christians ready to defend their faith, whether ready to know what they believe and walk in their faith. And so talk to us for a minute about how you've been successful to keep academia a priority, which is important. I mean, Christians need to be ready to lead. They need to be ready to take positions that God wants to use them in. You know, gone is the time that we have flaky Christians and thinking that we're going to change society, that we need to not be in this. We're in this, we're not of it. So we need to be not of it, but we need to be able to stand in positions of leadership, like Daniel, like Esther, like Joseph, and really make a difference. And that starts, with taking back, every element, but especially the academic area, and saying, no, we're not just stupid Christians or naive Christians. We're well-educated, well-equipped.
Right.
So talk to us about that excellence, and merging that, and how it's truly been an outreach to the community.
Yeah. So, and then statistically, if looking at it with homeschooling, a lot of times, actually, if it's done right, actually Ivy League schools are actually seeking out these homeschooled kids because they do take it very seriously. They take it ownership as far as the homeschooling world, that, they're very, in the beginning, it's very much more on the parents to the reading, the writing, to starting them out. But when you start to get these, that they get older, it's less and less that the parents are actually involved. There's more of like, they take ownership of their own learning and stuff like that with the curriculum.
Because 2020 taught me that. I was like, oh my goodness, some of my kids were like on it, like ready to go, and others like were like asleep during class, when it was and did very poorly. So we see how that creates that self-motivation and self-learner in a good way. So
right. So our hope at our home is that, like if we take it seriously, if we take, the academic seriously, if we're always checking in with our kids, and making sure like that they're developing, for me, when I went to public school, I didn't do the best. I was kind of just like pushed on to the next grade and stuff like that. So it's important, even if you're doing the public school as parents, that you're being intentional and you're having that role involved in it and with their education. And so for me, when it comes to our co-op, we always want to make sure that we're providing the best to our ability of the academics that we can provide for them, that we're challenging them, that they're learning, geography, that they're learning, foreign language, that we are developing and doing that as best to our ability that we can bring. We want to add like, an architecture class, like we had just a trades class our last semester, and it was so awesome to see
little kids, right?
Yeah.
What age does it go up to?
So we have from ages 18 months to 2 years or to 4 years is like our preschool prep. And then we have ages 5 to 8 is what we call like our bigs. And that's like our elementary, and then we have 9 and older that we're adding this coming fall. So we love that each semester we're building and we're growing. And as we're doing this, our community is really taking notice, and our church is really just like so on board, and they're involved. They get involved. We have members from our church that come and they volunteer to help up with cleanup, they help up with teaching, with volunteering and assisting. And so we've just seen it be such a natural extension of our church, and that our church is so on board. We actually had people that were giving specifically to this. So we created our own student sponsorship. So where our church people, or even people part of co-op, that they're sponsoring students, because there's some families, when it comes to homeschooling, there are sacrifices. There are things that, for me, I can't work a full-time job, like there is a lot of that juggling. There is a lot of like, that my husband has to be involved after he's worked, a full day, because there is that commitment there. So for some people, they can't financially, or they can't do that. And so for us, when we started the student sponsorship program, it's great that we're going to be able now this coming fall to sponsor students to be a part of co-op if they feel like financially they couldn't, contribute to, they couldn't commit to that. So we've just seen the community be so involved and on board, and we're excited as each semester is just getting better and better and getting the word out there, because I really think that there is kind of a shift taking place within the homeschooling world.
Amazing. So good what God's doing there, Pastor Julia. And so if you're watching this podcast and you're praying, should I do public school? Should I do private school? Should I do online school? Should I homeschool? What would your advice be to a parent who's navigating that area, that space?
Yes. So for me, it all comes back to peace. It has to come back to what do you have peace in your heart about? And sometimes we do things out of fear, and that's not going to be a long-term solution for you because it's only a matter of time that you can't keep up with that. And so when we were having these questions, my husband and I, we were really discussing the reasons as to why we're doing that. And so the main reason why we homeschool is because of the influence, is because we feel like even on our worst day, that we will provide better for our children than the government or the culture would provide on their best day. And so even on our worst day, when we maybe are having a frustration or things are going on and it's feeling overwhelming, that we can take that moment to pause and to say, it's not going to look like public school. It's not going to be, a 5, 6, 7, 8 hours that they're gone for the day at a public school. But for us, the reasons why we made this decision was because we wanted to have the major influence on our children, and that we wanted to have the freedom to be able to teach them and to really avoid the culture and the agenda of what's being pushed in New York State, of what's being pushed in the public school systems, and that, we can have the freedom to teach them biblically based and not have the Big Bang Theory or the evolution theory being taught to our children, but that we can at a young age teach them creation and to believe into Father God and to have that first firm foundation with them. And so for me, if someone's questioning, how do I get started? What are my, tips as far as getting involved in doing this, is that the way that I started finding people that homeschooled and asking lots of questions. I started asking questions. I started finding Facebook groups. And for us in our local area, which we're in Brockport, which is in the outskirts of Rochester, I found a Facebook group of families that homeschool. And then I found the greater Rochester area homeschoolers. And I began to ask questions. I began to discover different co-ops. I went to many other co-ops before I really started building and growing ours to the level that it is now. And so I started seeing, how are people doing things? Maybe what could I improve in our homeschool co-op? And so, but having that same page with me and my husband, and having peace and understanding that my husband, actually what we love a lot about our co-op is that we have so many dads involved, that it's not just all on the moms to do it, but that the dads have a part to play in the education realm as well. So I would say the first thing is asking the questions and finding that community. And then there's something when you get started, then once you've made your decision and finding a co-op and checking out co-ops and you're like, this is a good fit. That's where we've seen a lot of people, they pulled their children out either midway through year or at the end of a year to start then with us in the fall. But that making sure your kids socially have those relationships being built, but that then also you've decided kind of which curriculum to go with, if you're not going to create your own curriculum. And for us, we've tried different curriculums. It's not one size fits all. What I use for my middle daughter is probably going to be different what I use for my older daughter, because we all learn very differently. So I would say once you've kind of nailed that down of the socially and then the curriculum, then you start with like your letter of intent, and you find your local school district who you email. And it's literally just one sentence saying that I have decided to homeschool my students. So in my mind, I felt like there were so many things I need to do. It was so overwhelming, but really once you kind of get going, it's not a big deal. It's not a lot. And like I said, sometimes at our house, we get all of my daughter's work done within the matter of an hour to 2 hours. And then we have the rest of the day to decide, what we want to do and what else we want to learn, where we want to go. And so that would be, how I would get started. And so it seemed like a lot back then, but now I'm helping families and helping moms and parents make that decision and really explain it to them in a way that it's actually not overwhelming.
I love that. So good. And providing that option for people is so, so important. And so I think, in just wrapping this up, if you're praying about it, just really be involved in your child's life in every area. When I knew that we were going to do public school, I knew that it was my position now, more than ever, to be their Bible teacher. Like, if they're not going to get that at school, then we need to make sure their foundation is good, definitely in that area, not just because we're pastors, but because that's my responsibility as a mom. And then having the discussions, like, what are they teaching you at school? Be involved in that. Just had a discussion with my son about evolution. And the good side of it is, if you are creating that foundation, then it helps them to know why they don't believe in it. It actually can push them into a further understanding of why they believe what the Bible says. And so, but we have to be active and involved in that process. Even if you're homeschooling, don't just think, take it a step further and make sure that you're active in your children's lives, education, spirituality, social aspects of their lives. Be a part of that. And so don't be an absent parent, but be very involved in that from whatever age, from preschool clear up to when they graduate. Stay involved, stay informed about what's going on in their lives. And so, you have to take on that responsibility first and foremost as a parent, whether you decide to do public school, private school, or homeschool. Don't rely on a teacher or a Sunday school teacher to show up in your child's life the way that you were called by God to do it. So stay informed, stay a part of it. And hopefully this discussion helped you understand the path for your child. So that's prayer. Pray about it. Where do you see peace? What are your options? Stay knowledgeable about what's going on in your school district, what your children are being taught. Having the hard conversations and being led by the peace of God. And then if you feel like public school isn't the best option, I know that there are other options in support groups, such as the co-ops for you. Maybe you're a Christian and you're like, wow, I love what they're doing in the Gospel New York, and I would love to be a part of starting something like that. Get a group together and start to do that. I believe that that's truly what's going to happen. A trend of the church is to see these co-ops and education system pop up from within the church walls to be that resource for people in this hour. So thank you so much, Pastor Julia. Anything else, any closing comments that you want to share as we wrap up today?
No, I love what you said. Again, it's like, it has to be exactly whatever commitment that you're making to it. You just have to be extremely intentional with your children. And that is something that has always been a main thing at our church. And so it's important that, for us to raise godly children. And so it just felt like a natural extension with us for the co-op. But yeah, as any family, they have to decide what is the best decision and what do they have peace about for their area and for their family.
So good. Well, I'm excited about what God's doing there, praying for you guys as you continue to keep your hand to the plow and God continues to bless it in many ways. So I hope you enjoy this podcast. Stay tuned for many more topics, and we're excited for all that God's going to do in and through your family as you commit your family's way to the Lord. We love you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.